Good evening and welcome to Crowd Church. It's great to be here. Tonight I am joined by Dave Connolly.
Hi, Johan. How are you doing?
Good. Have you had a good week?
I've had a lovely week, really enjoying the weather and just plenty of time to do whatever it is I needed to do.
Yeah, it's been nice to have a week of sunshine, although it seems like it's about to end.
Oh, no.
I know. The weather's looking a bit... We always talk about the weather here. It's not a weather forecast. But yeah, it is about to take a turn for the worst, I believe. But, for anyone who's outside of the northwest of England, it's quite rare to get a really hot week, isn't it? So we get excited about these things.
Enjoy it while
Yeah, exactly. Well, we could chit chat about the weather in our weeks, and we were just talking about North Wales.
Yes.
Actually, interesting fact for everyone that brings me into introducing our speaker tonight, Ade, in a second, is that I've been in North Wales for the weekend. I've been on holiday for a few days with my family, and we actually met in real life earlier today, Ade and I, and his wife Sonia, and my family. And it was the first time we'd met in person rather than just over Crowd Church. So it's
wow.
Crowd Church friends becoming in real life friends. So
really seeing each other.
Yeah. So this is like, it's exciting. So I'm going to pass over to Ade now, and my officially in real life friend now. But he's doing the talk for us tonight, and Ade, I'll pass over to you. I think we don't have sound. We'll just give that a second.
Give that. Here we go.
We have him. Okay. Passing over to you again, Ade.
Got stuck in the green room again. That's the insiders and the techniques in the background. So yes, it was wonderful to meet you in person. We're slowly building up a list of people we're meeting who come from Liverpool and spend some time in North Wales, where, let's face it, it is just beautiful here. We're so to be here. But tonight we're not going to talk about North Wales. Well, we'll save that for Conversation Street. Tonight we are going to talk about success. Now, when I started preparing this, the working title I had was The Price of Success. But by the time I got to the end of it, it was really The Purpose of Success. And so let me just take a moment to think about the typical definition, the dictionary definition of success. We get phrases like accomplishment of goals, attainment of wealth, prosperity, favorable outcome of ventures. Now, from a societal point of view and culturally, we tend to associate success either directly or indirectly with wealth. Typically the rich and the famous. And when it comes to wealth, the UK bank, the HSBC, did a survey in 2025 to just get a feel for what did people think wealthy was, and the number they came up with was £213,000 a year for an income. Now, this is 5.5 times our national average. If you look at stats, you find 4% of this country earn over 100,000, 1% over 207,000. So we're getting into the fraction of a percentage is what we have categorized wealthy as, what we would see success in wealth as. Now, success comes at a price. If you think about it from a career point of view or a sporting point of view or pretty much any venture, there's higher stress. The higher you climb, the higher the stress, the greater the expectations, the more time you're taken away from family and friends, and this in itself almost leads to increased isolation and in some cases burnout. And we think, okay, well, people who are really, really wealthy and successful, they don't worry about this, these financial stresses that the rest of us do. Well, actually, studies have shown that the really wealthy actually really worry about losing their wealth. They worry about losing their standing, their perception. They also worry about their friends really just after them for their money and not for who they are. So, excuse me, we are going to have a look at a particularly successful individual in the book of Luke, a guy called Zacchaeus, who was a tax collector. Now, it's quite a short passage. It's Luke 19, 1-10. So if I can stop coughing, I am going to read this. Well, actually, apologies, I'm going to read this anyway. So, starting at verse 1, Jesus entered Jericho and made his way through the town. There was a man there named Zacchaeus. He was the chief tax collector in the region, and he had become very rich. He tried to get a look at Jesus, but he was too short to see over the crowd. So he ran ahead and climbed a sycamore fig tree beside the road, for Jesus was going to pass that way. When Jesus came by, he looked up at Zacchaeus and called him by name. Zacchaeus, he said, come down. I must be a guest in your home today. Zacchaeus quickly climbed down and took Jesus to his house in great excitement and joy. But the people were displeased. He has gone to be the guest of a notorious sinner, they grumbled. Meanwhile, Zacchaeus stood before the Lord and said to him, I will give half my wealth to the poor, Lord, and if I've cheated people on their taxes, I will give them back 4 times as much. Jesus responded, salvation has come to this home today, for this man has shown himself to be a true son of Abraham. For the Son of Man came to seek and save those who are lost. So just to set the scene here, Jericho was a very desirable place to live. It was a prime toll center for the region. It was known as the city of palm trees. It was incredibly rich. It's also thought of as a very powerful and strategic city. It was a major exporter of balsa wood. There were abundant springs. There were fertile lands. This was an agricultural hub and a trade center. This was not a backwater town. This was the place to be. And being at the top of his game as a tax collector here, rather than some backwater town, that made him a big fish in a big sea. Now, Zacchaeus, we don't know too much from that passage, but we do know that, first of all, his name means pure. He is a man of small stature, and he is a chief tax collector. Now, this would have presented him a number of problems with his fellow Jews. For a start, he was a Jew working for Romans, so he was working for the oppressor. He would have been considered an outcast. In fact, he would have been considered ritually unclean. His tithes would not have been accepted in the temple. In fact, he wasn't allowed to partake in any of their rituals. And on top of that, he would have also been disdained for overtaxing people, because the Roman system of taxes were the Romans wanted a certain amount of tax, and this would have been based on initially the land you own, the business you conducted, number of people in your family, and they had a number. No one else knew what it was, but the tax collectors were allowed to add whatever they wanted on top of that, so to keep them going. And they notoriously added a lot of money onto that. They extorted the people. Now they had, Roman soldiers there to enforce these taxes. So the people really had no choice but to pay and be extorted. And so he'd been hated for that as well. So on one hand, he's one of the most prominent men in Jericho. Now, we assume that he's really good at his job because he's a chief tax collector, not just a tax collector. We can also assume the guy is middle-aged or older because it would have taken him time to get here. But this is a guy who is, let's say he's on par with today's millionaire. He's someone who's made it. He's rich in wealth. However, he is poor in status. And he did not belong. He would have been incredibly lonely. So he has this amazing encounter with Jesus. So for a start, despite his wealth, something drives him to go out there and see Jesus as he's passing through. So assuming he's got it all, he doesn't really. And he also wasn't going to be held back by the crowd or being small in stature. So he climbs a tree, and we assume that was probably the most efficient course of action. He could have tried to push through the crowd, but let's face it, he was a really unpopular guy and he's physically very small. By the time he got to the front, Jesus would probably have passed by. He's rich, he could have tried to bribe, but again, that probably would have taken too long. So this guy who's likely middle-aged or older, and he's wearing a robe, he does a desk job for a living, he climbs a tree. So, that's something we can assume he does not do very often, but he was that driven to go and get a glimpse at Jesus, he climbed a tree. Now, we don't know if he was really thinking through and aware of the type of tree he was climbing, but in Jewish culture, the sycamore fig tree is known as the sin-spreading tree due to its dense canopy. The idea is any sin committed underneath it actually can pass to all people on the tree. Now, if you have a whole row of these things and they're all overlapping, it can pass to anyone who's under any of these trees. In fact, they were always about keeping these things within your boundary. Either way, he had a problem, he saw a solution, and he acted straight away. Again, these are one of the reasons probably why he was good at his job. Being a motivated problem solver is an important ingredient in a successful career. And then comes the encounter. Jesus walks by, and he instantly calls, and right away Zacchaeus answers. He doesn't hang around. He doesn't get swayed by the comments of the crowd. And ultimately, he is open to hearing the harsh truth and reality that he is a sinner. But he doesn't waste time here. He jumps again, not wasting time, being time efficient, another important trait of being a successful person. And then after having spent this one short time period with Jesus, he gives away half his possessions. Now, Jesus did not ask him to do that. He just, off his own bat, recognized he was a sinner, recognized he needed to make changes, and said, look, I'm giving away half my possessions, and anyone I've cheated, I will repay them back fourfold. Now, interestingly, he also, as far as we know from this, he also remained in his successful job. He wasn't asked to leave it, and he didn't feel convicted to leave it. So he's still a Jew working for the Romans. As I said, Jesus did not tell him to leave it. But we obviously would assume going forward that he would have taxed people fairly, and given his position in that system, maybe he had the opportunity to change the system for more people. But the crucial point here is his success now benefits people other than himself. They benefit the community, for the people who he had given half his possessions to, for the people who he had repaid, for the people who, going forward, he would have taxed at a more reasonable rate, and possibly for any positive changes he brought to that system in Jericho. So, honest success is not unbiblical. I mean by that, honest, fair work for a fair reward. And Jesus talks about this in Matthew 25, the parable of the talents, where a master gives 5 talents to one worker, 2 talents to another, and 1 to a third worker. The master then goes away for a period of time and comes back, and the gentleman who had 5 has invested, worked hard, and made another 5. And the same with the one who had 2, he then made another 2. And they were rewarded, well done, good and faithful servant. Now, the guy who's given 1 chose to do nothing with it. He didn't even put it in the bank for interest. And he's cast into darkness, and his talent is given to the one who did well with 5. So we can see from this that hard work resulting in success is rewarded, not punished. We can also see from this that some of us will be given more opportunities than others for success. And it doesn't stop here. Paul, in his letter to the Ephesians, says in 4:28, let the thief no longer steal, but rather let him labor doing honest work with his own hands, so that he may have something to share with anyone in need. So the results of the work aren't just for the worker. They are to be shared where it is needed. And this practice goes all the way back to Leviticus. In chapter 9, verses 9 to 10, when you reap the harvest of your land, you shall not reap your field right up to its edge. Neither shall you gather the gleanings after your harvest. And you shall not strip your vineyard bare, neither shall you gather fallen grapes of your vineyard. You shall leave them for the poor and for the sojourner. I am the Lord your God. So what we can see here is that honest success is a biblical principle. Hard work being rewarded. It is not just for us. We are the steward of its benefits, and we are to use it to help others who need help. And some of us will have more opportunities for success than others. So it really means they will have more opportunities to bless and support others. So taking these ideas and looking inward, are we searching with vigor like Zacchaeus was? And Jesus isn't walking down the main street of our respective towns and villages here. It's, are we reading scripture daily? Are we praying daily? Are we meeting with other believers? Are we overcoming obstacles to these things, or are we just making excuses? And then, are we answering immediately? And that can be, prompting from the Holy Spirit, are we listening for that? But also biblical instruction. There are plenty of very simple guidelines that we are told to do. Are we answering those? 1 John 3:17, if anyone has material possessions and sees a brother or sister in need, but has no pity on them, how can the love of God be in that person? And finally, are we acting with love? Are we sharing that success where we have it, the benefits of that success? And that doesn't actually have to be only financial. It can be some of the skills that we have built up as well. Are we using those to serve those in our church, in our community around us? Our community here is really central. We are not meant to be alone. We are not meant to be successful alone. Hebrews 10:25, not neglecting to meet together, as is the habit of some, but encouraging one another. And that's our role in this. We are here to encourage one another as we wait on God, as we study his word. And that is where I would like to bring this to a close tonight. Thank you.
Wow.
Great. Thanks so much, Ade. That is just so much in there.
It's great.
Really great. What did you think, Dave? Any immediate things that jump out?
Yeah, I just loved the story. I loved the delivery aid, the things you brought out there. And I think the thing that always stands out, just about, here's a guy who's got everything, but no one to share it with. And he knows he's lacking something. And yet, he climbs the tree, almost still hidden, but Jesus is coming along, he's going somewhere, and Jesus stops and calls him by name. And I just think there's something wonderful whenever Jesus stops and there's a beginning of a conversation, calls him by name. Just amazing.
Because there's something about Jesus' presence, isn't there? And when he encounters Zacchaeus, that it actually changed. Like his response is so counterculture. Like he completely does a 360, well, a 180, not a 360. That would be the same direction. A 180. Maths was never my strong point. He does a complete 180 though, doesn't he? Like in terms of where he was on money and wealth and success, and actually when he comes into the presence of Jesus, he's like, it's not that Jesus tells him, but he's instantly, I find it really interesting that he's instantly convicted.
Yeah.
And he feels it necessary to give half his money away and to repay all those that he'd swindled, and to change his ways and to be more generous and honest with money, and to use his wealth to sort of benefit many, not just himself. And I think, isn't that interesting that it's just that sheer encounter of being in Jesus' presence. Jesus hadn't told him to do that. No one's said, oh, you're really bad, you're living like this.
Yeah.
It's just the very coming face to face with who Jesus is changes him. I find that incredible.
Well, we see it repeatedly, don't we, in all these stories that we get in the Gospels, but it's the counter culture Jesus, isn't it? Or Jesus, the revolutionary aid. And, everybody hates Zacchaeus. They despise him. Even though he's got everything, they just despise him. And yet Jesus, he's the one that Jesus wants to talk to. And he says to him, again, I find it's really moving. Jesus says to him, come down, because I'm coming to your house. That's the last place anybody wants to go to.
Yeah.
To that level of association, you know, and then, you know, we see what happens. I'm so thankful that we don't know what the conversation was between Jesus and Zacchaeus. Otherwise, men being men, or mankind being mankind, humans being humans, we would have made a program out of it. But we don't hear, but we see the fruits of repentance, which Ade brought out wonderfully.
Yeah, absolutely. And I loved the other bit that I really loved about what Ade shared was just this whole idea that when we work and what we earn and what we create with our hands and, you know, everything that we have, all the success, all the money that we earn is for sharing. And it's not just for our own benefit, but it's for the benefit of wider community. And I love that. And you see it so often with, like, you know, business people who are Christian, where they, you know, not just Christians, but often Christians are particularly good at it, give a lot of their money away. And actually, just that real challenge that's there in the Bible quite a lot about sharing with those in need. And it's so counterculture to what we often see in the world, right? We see these, I don't want to pick on anyone, but these Elon Musks or Kardashian type characters that are on TV screens and, you know, the big tech bros in America. And you just think they are not benefiting everyone with their wealth. They're benefiting, well, mainly themselves and a few people who work for them right at the top. And we do live in a world, don't we, today where the rich are getting richer, like, and that gap between the richest and poorest is actually getting bigger in a lot of our societies, not smaller. And and I just think it is so counterculture. Jesus is a revolutionary. What he teaches here and what he demonstrates is so counterculture to what we see about very successful rich people today. And, you know, it's easy to sit and criticize people, isn't it? Because I don't have that kind of money to give away if I wanted to, you know, but nonetheless, I think it's just not what we see a lot of. People build more wealth for themselves for their own gain, don't they?
I think giving is, for me, it has to come with a cost, you know, so I think, you know, the culture at the time, I think Middle Eastern culture is very different than our own, not just historically. I think even today, it was very reciprocal. So, like, I have some Farsi friends, and you know, if you ever invite them out around for a meal, come around for a meal, well, you can't even get it in your diary until you've told them when you're going to their house. So, you know, because it's reciprocal. It's not one-upmanship. It's we want to participate in this, and they'll bring stuff. And I think I see something lovely about a society, a culture of reciprocation and value. And as you're saying, Han, that we share what we have. And it should cost. You know, I think, you know, if you've got, these figures are beyond me, like, you know, £10 million in the bank, to give somebody 10,000, it is still significant, but it probably isn't to you. You know, so I think, you know, giving is about reciprocation. But what I see in Zacchaeus is fruits of repentance. The very thing that was an idol to him, that like was like a god, finance stuff, you know, that he got from doing from his job. That's what he surrendered. You know, and I think we need to know what it is to surrender those things that are idols in our lives. You know, that we count so important. Let's share them. I bet you those people were terrified when he started doing that. You know, what's the catch, Zacchaeus? You're going to text me more next time.
Yeah,
you know.
It's interesting, isn't it? We've got a few comments here on the feed that I'll just pull up as well. So we've got quite a few people on the feed here. So we've got Alicia, Ellis, Rach, Sharon, Roz, Sonia, MJS Player, so ID, Catherine. So we've got a number of people listening in live on the feed. And one comment I've got is here from Alicia says, there was so much fascinating context here in Ade's talk.
Yeah.
I knew Zacchaeus was hated, but I didn't realise the connection between his work and the oppression of Rome. Hi, Ade, Anna and Dave. What does sharing your skills and money, etc., look like in your own lives? That's from Sharon. Oh, there's a big buzz on that.
Ooh,
It's
big
gone.
buzz.
Fine. It's gone. So did everyone catch that? So what does sharing your skills and money look like in your own lives? That's a question from Sharon. Any thoughts, guys?
What about you, Ade?
The fact I'm here right now, so I am an engineer and a physicist.
Mm-hmm.
I often talk to people who don't know a thing about technical anything
Mm-hmm.
and convince them this is a really good thing to do for the business. So actually speaking in front of people, that's something I do quite comfortably. And so having been a Christian for a number of years, studied the Bible for a number of years, and more recently in Bible college, it's just coming here and taking what I do for a day job, but
Mm-hmm.
with a theological and scriptural context rather than a scientific context.
Yeah.
That's an example of skills.
Yeah, that's a really good part of it. I think, yeah, I feel the same. I feel like a large part of being generous is like, for me, it's being generous. Yeah, with our money, but also with our time and our resources. So, like me and my husband Andy, we like to like open our house, open our just our space or our diary, our lives to people. And I think, yeah, that can be money because sometimes people have financial needs, but also it's giving people things to borrow when they need them, or being like, come stay in our house the weekend, we're away, or come and have a meal with us, you're on your own, or it can be really just little practical things. But I think you're right, Dave, it's about a generosity of heart. And yeah, for me, that's a really important part of it. It's about being generous with whatever we're blessed with in whatever way. Like use my car, use my time, But also, you're right, Ada, is about time as well, like, and your skills. So doing things like this or whatever we're good at, giving it to the purposes of God and to bless other people as well.
I think time is really important
Mm.
because once
Having a few sound issues tonight. Bear with us, folks. We'll keep going.
So one of the things I quite like about this passage is, and this is where I see Jesus really being a revolutionary.
I think with time is the most precious thing that we have, which affects all the other things. But once that time is spent, it's gone.
Yeah.
You just don't get that back. And I think it's wonderful to spend time with people. Some people are easier to spend time with than others. But I would just encourage people that when we're with people, to give them our best, give them our concentration, put our phones away, type of thing. It's horrible when you're talking with somebody and they change. They're looking at the phone, and I know they might be waiting for a kidney transplant or something, but most of us aren't. Let's give people our undivided attention.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I've got another comment here on the feed, which is from Alicia. She says, this was a refreshingly nuanced take on what success is, especially for people of faith. So it's not just about what can be done with money, but how you employ your other gifts. Yeah, I think we just covered that, but really good point. I thought as well, an interesting point that Ade made was about how like we're called to steward what we're given, but not everybody's given the same amount. So like some people are given more to steward than others. And that's interesting, isn't it? Because sometimes you can look at it from a human perspective and be like, well, why have they been given so much money or resource or opportunity? Because they're not actually using it as well as I might think I would do in their shoes. I'm not saying I would, but when you're like, sometimes there's that thing, isn't it? Like, why doesn't God give just good people like all of that stuff? But I suppose Zacchaeus is like a great example of actually anyone has that potential when they encounter Jesus. But I just wondered if you had any thoughts about that, Ade, while you were prepping the talk, like that whole idea of we're not all given the same, in terms of stewardship.
Yeah, absolutely. I personally, I'm blessed enough to have been born into a Christian family. My parents loved each other. They loved the Lord. They stayed together. I came from a stable family. I was able to go to a polytech and study engineering and science. Live at home, commute to that, so not have racket massive debts, and then go on to a career in science and engineering, which is generally jobs are reliable. I could have chosen a completely different career path and not had anything like the number of opportunities I had today, whilst having worked equally hard at that career path. So some of it is the blessings I was born into, some of it is the work I've done with the opportunities I've been given, and some of it is just the choices I've made. There's so many things there, and
Yeah.
also we pray that God will open the right doors, close the wrong doors, and everything. But Sonia and I, there's been that as well.
Yeah, I think that's really helpful, and it's a really helpful perspective. Like, yeah, it's interesting. Go on, Dave.
We're only to steward that which God has given us. I'm looking from the God side of thing. We're just accountable for that. And when people say to me, like maybe let's say faith, Dave, will you pray that God gives me more faith? And my normal response is a little bit tongue in cheek, but it's usually goes something like, well, what are you doing with what he's given you? If you want more faith, use what you have. And when we talk about stewarding, whether it be gifts or resources, we just need to know that we do it for the glory of God, and for and at the same time, it generally being a blessing to other people. But we will be stewardship is all about being accountable, whether it be even our families, like our kids. We steward that, and I think we just forget sometimes that there is a day of reckoning where we have, stewarding. God says, what have you done with it?
Yeah, I think that's a challenge for us all, isn't it? And I feel like so much of this for me is about heart posture and holding things lightly. So yeah, whether it's your children or your time or your resources or your like money in your bank account, for me it's like knowing that the earth is the Lord's and everything in it, and actually everything I own, everything I have is, as Ade touched on, is from God, it's for God, it's back to God in the end. We're all given different starts and chances in life and different opportunities, but actually God just expects us to have a good heart posture of generosity and stewarding as best we're able to what he gives to us. And I think that, just that holding things quite lightly and not clinging to things too tight is really helpful for me.
I'm not sure whether it's just the day in which we live, but it's a little bit like, I want that. And we spend so much time looking at what we don't have or what somebody else has that we miss what we've been entrusted with. And because our attention is somewhere else. So we don't really do that stewarding that well. But I love that phrase about posturing. It is all about our heart because, God knows it. And whilst we may be able to fool ourselves at times, we never fool God. God knows what our heart is and our heart responses to things.
I've got a few more comments coming through on the feed. So Ellis says, one thing I struggle with when it comes to sharing and giving is doing it because I feel like I should rather than because I want to. I struggle to find the balance with that. I think it's a really good point. I think it is difficult, isn't it, to feel like I ought to give rather than I genuinely want to.
Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts on that, Dave?
Well, I remember just a few months ago we were sat here and we were at this very conversation. I think for me it's always been hold things lightly, and when I'm sowing into things I'm giving, I might give to this person, but in fact, it's God. I'm doing it on behalf of God. So at our local Tesco, there's a lovely guy, and I know his name, and he's really amused I know his name. And I'm like, well, why wouldn't I? I ask you it all the time, and I know what he likes. He likes coffee, and he likes a certain sandwich, etc., etc. And I will just get him them, not because I'm anything. It's not going to bust my bank to do that, because I don't want him to even have to ask me. I want to see a need and I want to be able to respond. And and it comes back to what you said, Hannah. It's this thing of our heart, just our heart on giving freely. People, ask you for money, and you might give them something, and somebody else say, you shouldn't have done that. They could go and buy drugs with that. They could go and do such and such. And you know what? They could. But I'm giving them. I'm just wanting to bless them. I'm giving them what they've asked for. And, we can find that in scripture as well, But I just think, let's give generously and freely. When we give it, let go of it. You mustn't spend it on this, but give it and be a blessing.
Definitely. A couple more comments that have come through. So Alicia said, also, I think one point about how some are wealthy and can be afraid of a reversal of, not having their money anymore, like losing their wealth, or possibly people only caring about them for their wealth or their success or power or whatever. I think she said that's really good, and that's very, it's a good point, and that's a very fearful way to live. And I think that's true. And I think we can be fearful, can't we, whether we've got much or little when it comes to money.
Yeah.
And actually, some of it is just about perspective, like whether you've got much or little, trusting that God provides, and actually everything is his.
Yeah.
And again, that encounter with Jesus changes your perspective, because money is not your God. God is your God.
Yeah. I mean, we're all blessed, aren't we? That, we have, most of us in this room, we have generally, I think, what we need. It's not that there aren't things that we want that we haven't got, but we generally, have what we need. And I think, but if I was to go and give somebody, 20 quid, I mean, I would probably want to give them more than that, because I want to feel the bite. I want to feel the cost of doing that. Not so I can feel good, but so I can feel that cost. And I want them to be blessed significantly. And what they do with it is beyond me. But I also want to be dependent on God, for my finances. And we talk about in the church being full-time or, living by faith. Well, I think if you work in the Ford Motor Company, you're living by faith. Whatever we do, we need to live by faith. And it's God's blessing that we've even got that job.
Yeah. Yeah. Any more thoughts from you, Ade? I'm aware that you're over in North Wales, but we still want to hear from you.
Yes,
Shout.
He's just not in this
I'll
physical
shout
studio with us. Yeah, shout from North Wales.
Yeah. We'll talk all night, just me.
Yeah, it's just hard to get a word in between me and Dave, that's all.
I have noticed that. I think one of the things to wind to about, about the difference between feeling I should do something whereas I want to. You got to start somewhere, and you have clear guidance in the Bible.
Yeah.
To meet together, to study the Bible, to pray, to support the helpless, and sometimes you just have to. It's almost fake it till you make it, right? There's an instruction here. I should do. I don't feel like doing it, but do it anyway.
Yeah.
And I think I've gone through. It's only in the last 6 months, I think, I've come out of a rut where I actually want to read the Bible. I've been reading it daily anyway, but because all the stuff that we've been going through in our personal lives, it's like, right, this time I do this. I don't feel like it, but I'm going to do it. And it got to a point where I thought, you know what, I'm going to do it. I think I'm going to do this even better, and I'm going to sign up to an online Bible college. But up until that, and now, I've kind of gone through that phase now where I want to. I can't wait till the next time. I'm just kind of learning so much. But I had to go through a good 18 months. Yeah, I'd say a good 18 months of just doing it because I knew I should be doing it. Being very open in my conversation with God that I'm doing this because I should. I'd like to want to do this, but right now I just don't feel that. I just don't feel much of anything. If we do that with the right heart and we ask God to help us through it, we will come to a place where we do want to do these things. But very often we have to put in the work to get ourselves there.
Yeah. It's one of the it's discipline, isn't it? Which isn't really much of a 21st century word, because we all like to do what we want to do.
Yeah. It's funny, isn't it? Because it's like you say, that fake it till you make it thing. And I love your honesty about your situation, Ade, and the fact that sometimes it is a choice, and Yeah, and the feelings sort of come later, and sometimes they're quicker, aren't they? And I think we've all got different examples of how sometimes you kind of just have to make the first step and Jesus moves towards you. But then sometimes there's situations like Zacchaeus where Jesus literally steps towards him and he calls him down out of his tree. It wasn't that Zacchaeus stepped towards Jesus, but Jesus he called him out, didn't he? And said, hey, I want to speak to you.
Yeah.
So I think it can be both ways, and it's okay. And I think it's really honest to be like, I don't really feel like doing this, but as I do it, because I know it's the right thing to do, God, would you change my heart? And and Ade's example is that over time that has been his experience, and I think I've got examples of that as well. And mine wasn't necessarily about reading the Bible, but I've been through seasons where I don't really want to pray. I don't really want to talk to God sometimes. Because of, different difficult situations. But I think when you kind of take a step towards God, I think he steps towards you. It's like there's a Bible verse that's like, draw near to God and he'll draw near to you. And I think it is sometimes there is that two-way process.
I mean, when you read these stories, like that they are so personal, whether it be Zacchaeus or the woman caught in adultery or the one with the issue of blood, the Gospels are just full of these things where whether Jesus calls them by name, somewhere in that interaction, they become deeply personal and life-changing. They're heart-changing, aren't they? And I think only when our hearts are changed do our feelings get changed. That's pretty good. I must write that down. Only when our
Say it again, Dave.
Only when our hearts get changed do our feelings begin to change.
Yeah.
And I think that would be really true, for me. I'm quite a persistent person. So again, just doing something until I get that longing, because I know it's good. It's like, lots of things in life are good, aren't they? Like going to the gym, eat well, big list. And we all know what's good, but we need the discipline to do them and to do them continually and consistently.
Yeah. And I love the just reflecting on this story. The thing that really sticks out to me is that it's Jesus' presence that changes our perspective.
It does.
And so I think however you get to be in Jesus' presence, whether that's he pursues you, you have to persistently pursue him, even when you don't feel like it, like Ade's example, like that encounter with Jesus is what changes your perspective and changes your life, really. So I think it's worth, that persistence, that discipline, that wrestle if it needs to be to get to that place.
I think sometimes we get a bit afraid of silence, and with our walk with God. We think, as he got off, where he's just trying to create a space for us to maybe just think, what is it that God is saying? What is it I am wanting? What is it I'm wanting to communicate to him? And he's just always there, and he's always intimate with us. And when he speaks, when he acts, when he reaches out, that was so profound what happens to Zacchaeus. I just love it, and that the very thing that was his idol, it was broken. Because you can't break the idol in somebody's life and then hold on to the money. I'll tell you what, you can borrow me donkey. That doesn't cut it. He breaks the idol, which was left behind, and he starts to restore what he's taken from people.
Yeah. I think it's it goes back to that verse that Ade mentioned it actually during his talk. I noted it down. It was 1 John 3, where it sort of says, how can the love of God be in that person who doesn't share what they have with others and meet people's needs? And that's really challenging, isn't it? Like, if you're not generous, if you're not sharing what you have with others, how can the love of God really be in you? It's like, oh, wow, that's tough.
That's
and yet I think, wow, but it's that encounter with the love of God that enables you to do that. That it was Jesus' love that called Zacchaeus down from the tree. Like, he saw him, he loved him, he called him out, and that encounter with Jesus' love enabled him to, it was having Jesus' love inside of him, wasn't it? That created that transformation, and then out of that came transformation to other people's lives and the community around him, people that he worked with, and collected taxes from. But yeah,
And it was natural,
yeah,
wasn't it? It was like
it's like the overflow.
That's the word.
Yeah.
Yeah. I thought I couldn't get it right. But it is out of the overflow. It was the natural response of encountering the presence and the power of Jesus. And you're like, he didn't have to think it all through. He didn't have to go away and lay a fleece. He, we don't know exactly what the time frame, but it's not long. He's in a tree. He's out of a tree. He's walking to his house. He's having dinner with Jesus.
Yeah.
And I bet you those people who were outside, people being people, I wonder what's going on in there, and they were waiting, maybe waiting for the pound of flesh or for Jesus to come out and sort of sorted them out. But it's what Zacchaeus says that is so impacting. It's amazing.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Any more thoughts from you, Ade?
Yeah, I think a key thing to pick up on here is it doesn't matter who you are,
Yes.
what you've done, what you think you've done. Zacchaeus, as I mentioned, he was the lowest of the low in one sense culturally. So if you look in the New Testament, there are numerous lists of sinners and tax collectors and prostitutes. They're down there with, the lowest dregs of society at that time. That's how low they think of them. And so this lowly guy then decided to go and climb the sin-spreading tree where some of that probably rubbed off on him on the way up. And Jesus, the revolutionary thing happening here is he is the last person that Jesus should have picked at. It should have been someone else, maybe a Pharisee or a religious leader or a really nice guy. Didn't. Took someone that society hated, and he was on the manky sin tree.
That's right.
That's the one he said, I'm coming home with you.
That's great.
And that is so challenging, isn't it? Like, because we so often want to, I don't know, discard people, or we assume people or they're beyond saving, or they're, they don't deserve it. Yeah. And our judgment is so often not God's judgment.
That's right.
We're like, sorry, Ade, go on, carry on.
So it's a bit like in your typical Hollywood film where a good guy goes to prison, everyone hates him. He walks up to the biggest, baddest dude in the whole place and picks a fight to change the entire atmosphere to suit him. You got to wonder, having people, the crowd, they were watching, they were seeing this, they see the lowest of the low on the manky tree, go for Jesus. And then, because word of mouth spreads, they're going to hear he's giving stuff away. Some of them will have seen it. And, what we don't see here is the actual impact that must have had in Jericho. That would have been ripe around the city. This is unheard of. I mean, anyone who worked for him must have been quaking in their boots, thinking, "Right, we're going to have to skim less off the top from now on." But it's this is massive. It's unfortunate that we just don't see beyond that in this text.
A few final comments coming through on the feed that I'll just read out because there's some good stuff here. So Sharon said, someone once told me that desire can follow attention. I found that really helpful. I can choose what I give my attention to, even if I don't feel like it, just as Ade said in his example. Alicia said, perspective is so critical because just as we could assume that our giving will be abused, we can also choose to assume that it's going to be used for good. And I believe our efforts count to God. Sharon also said, I think it can be a fun activity partnering with God to be generous. I think that's a really good point, actually. You can have some real adventures with giving, can't you? We've probably not got enough time to unpick them all, but I'm sure we've got some examples of that. Ellis says, I really relate to Ade there. I make sure to read the Bible every day, even though sometimes I don't feel like it. However, other days I feel really motivated and enjoy doing it. Both are edifying. That's a really good point. I'm aware that time is ticking along. So any final thought from either of you guys, just in sort of rounding up? We'll obviously go across to the live lounge in a minute, and the link for that will be coming up shortly on your screen or in the comments box. Oh, it's already in there, I'm told. Yeah, I'm a step behind. I know. It's almost like we've got tech guys behind us who know what they're doing. Yeah. But yeah, so there we are. Just to shame me as I'm speaking. There we are.
Get on the wall.
So yeah, our sound wasn't great tonight, but they're on top of everything else.
We fixed the sound.
They can't hear you, Matt. You're not on mic for once.
Yeah.
Matt's just shouting from the back. For anyone who's listening, Matt's just shouting from the back of the studio. No one can hear you. No one cares. No, exactly. Anyway, before this descends into total chaos, any final thoughts from you, Dave?
I'd just say that, you know, encountering Jesus loosened Zacchaeus' grip on money and the selfishness that more often than not accompanies it.
Amazing. Yep. And how about you, Ade? Have you got any final thoughts to leave us with?
Yeah, so Zacchaeus had it all. He had all the kind of wealth he wanted. He did not have community, and community really cannot be underestimated. And if you're watching
right.
this and you don't have community, please reach out to us. Heck, even come along to a live lounge after this. We are a online community of believers. It doesn't matter where you are. It doesn't matter if you haven't got a local church. We can be your local church, literally on your screen.
Yeah. Amen to that.
Amen.
Very true. Just to let you guys know, next week we're back, same time at 7 p.m. on Crowd. And next week we've got Mike Harris talking. So he's going to be here talking about when positivity doesn't help. And it's just a continuation of this series that we're doing on Jesus the Revolutionary. So Dave's laughing because he can't say the word revolutionary. I think it's
I've said it
I think
once.
it's a
I've
Scouse
said it
thing.
once.
Go on, Dave.
Jesus.
Before we sign off, just try it.
Jesus.
Jesus
the
the-
revolutionary.
Yeah, he's
Nearly.
He's been practicing, everyone. He's been practicing. Jesus the Revolutionary. I don't think it's that hard. Anyway, never mind. Tell us in the chat bar if you think revolutionary is hard to say. But yeah,
Join
on
the
that,
revolution.
exactly, join the revolution. So on that note, it's time to wrap up. But yeah, hopefully join us in the live lounge if you want to continue this chat. We'd love to see you. And if not, we'll see you next week. Take care.
Bye.